This is the Conscious Productivity Podcast, and I'm your host, Stephanie Woodward. This is where we're going to talk about your ambition and your drive and how to honor your ambition and drive without losing yourself in the hustle. It's about making the shift from unconscious productivity to conscious productivity. I am thrilled that you're here, and let's jump right in to today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Conscious Productivity Podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Woodward, and no, I'm not a geographer, and maybe the title of today's podcast might make you think that I am. We're talking microclimates today, but I will be talking about microclimate as a metaphor from and about your own teams. And this has really stemmed from a lot of the work with my teams where I'll have leaders, I'll have teams come to me and things just feel off with the team. The dynamics don't feel quite right. And as a leader, what can start to bubble up for you is you might be thinking, my team looks really stressed. Do we need to de-scope the work? Are there too many deliverables? Is the timeline too tight going on? Are our processes broken? Do we need to restructure? Do we need to hire? Do we need to cut scope? Do we need to push back on quarterly targets? Do we need to reskill the team? Do we need to up-level the team? These are all the things that can start to go through our head. And these are all very, very real questions. And sometimes they are the right questions. So sometimes you do need to de-scope, or sometimes you do need to upskill or reskill your team, or sometimes you do have too many deliverables on the go. But so much of the time, this can actually be the wrong diagnosis to think it's one of these things that's going on, because stress at work very often, is not actually about the work. It's about what I like to call the weather that's going on around the work. And by weather, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, I'm talking about how we can have weather environments at work. And when that shows up, we can have a particular climate on the team, in the organization, and that particular climate can create a weather system, and it can change continuously. And it's all about the interpersonal dynamics. It's about how the work gets done. These climate issues, these weather issues that I'm talking about, are often the things that we get stressed about, that keep us up at night, and that can cause real disruption for a team. And so before you start to go to, are our processes not working? Do my people need to be upskilled? I want you to think about it through the lens that we're going to talk about today, which is, what is the climate like on my team? And, think about it. There will be a time when you have either been leading a team or you've been on a team where the workload was really intense. Maybe the deadlines were really intense. The stakes might have been really high. And it felt good. Even though you had all of this kind of pressure, maybe you were in your zone of genius, you were working on something that felt really great. Usually it's because, and I'll hear people say, the other people I was working with, we were bouncing ideas off each other. Like, the energy was kind of electric. We were all beating to the same drum. We were getting this pulled together. The collaboration was working really well. I really respected everybody on the team. We all knew and all did our part to get this done. That can lead you to, even when you've been working long hours, to go home feeling energized, to feel really satisfied, really fulfilled, because the work will feel fulfilling within that kind of environment. Contrast that with a team where maybe the deadlines were just fine. Like, you weren't feeling like you were particularly under pressure, but it felt like you were being blocked at every turn. It felt like there was like unnecessary, whether it's red tape or unnecessary friction, not the healthy kind of creative tension that comes with doing important work, but just unnecessary friction as you went. Every meeting felt heavy, or there felt like there were tensions, unspoken rules in the room, or dynamics between people where it felt, am I getting the truth from other people in the room? That can lead you to dread certain interactions. And it's often that kind of environment that can actually leave us feeling the most depleted of all. It doesn't feel fulfilling. It doesn't feel satisfying. It can feel really stressful to get work done in those environments. Now, I'm going to argue there's different weather systems going on. There's different climates going on in both of those teams and both of those environments. And that quote unquote weather is actually what determines how you feel, and can often lead to the perception or feelings of stress or no stress. So today's episode is going to be a deep dive on that. This is the climate pillar of conscious productivity. And if you have joined for previous episodes, if you've listened to previous episodes, you know that I speak through three lenses when it comes to conscious productivity. There are three lenses to my framework, and that is clarity, climate, and flow. And today we are deep in that flow, in that climate pillar. Sorry, not flow. We're deep in the climate pillar. This is all about the climate on the team, the climate in the organization, the climate of how that work gets done. And this, I will say to you as a leader, understanding the climate of your team and making a difference on climate is one of the highest leverage things you can work on. And almost no one is talking to you about it. And it's not something that we think we need to be focusing on. We look at a lot of different things before we actually zero in on the climate of our team. If you're not a leader, I do want to say welcome, and you are welcome here as well. And so, just because I'm talking about this from a leadership lens, even if you don't manage people, you are part of a team climate. And so, it can be really helpful to listen to this through the lens of what is the climate of your team? What climate do you work best in? You will be affected by the microclimate of your team. You are a part of it. And so, as you listen to this episode, if you are an individual contributor, a team member on a team, think about how you contribute to the climate of your team and how you can support your leader in creating a microclimate that everybody can feel really good about and be able to get their best work done. So let's get into it. So I've highlighted that the metaphor that we're going to be working with today is all about weather and climate and microclimate. So let's start with the first part of this metaphor. So I'm going to take you through the different components, and then we'll dive into how this shows up in the workplace. So I want you to imagine that every single person on your team is their own individual weather system, right? We're all coming in to the workplace on any given day. Um, Someone walks in, it could be any given Tuesday, right? Someone walks in or joins the Zoom or the Teams meeting and they are sunny. Their weather system is sunny today. They slept well. Their kids got up and ready for school super easily. It was an easy drop off. They're feeling good. Someone else rolls in stormy. Maybe they had a bad commute. They had a rough conversation with their partner before they came in. Someone else is foggy. They didn't sleep well. They had a sick kid up all night. Or maybe someone is feeling really stretched too thin. And so their weather system is a combination of foggy and stormy. They're taking care of an aging parent, and they've still got a bunch of work demands, and they also haven't been sleeping very well. So we've got all of this showing up, all of these individual weather systems, and we all know that weather system can change hour by hour, week by week, day by day. This is just being human, and this is a part of having humans come together to get work done. We can have a number of different things going on in the background, which you may or may not be privy to. So when I say this, I'm not suggesting that you are necessarily aware that the person has all of this going on in the background. You may just notice their weather system. You may just notice, oh, they're in a particularly good mood today. They're seeming pretty up, or they're seeming pretty down. They're seeming pretty stressed. So these weather systems, I just want you to be aware of that and think about, we have a very visceral experience of this. We experience our colleagues every day in whatever weather system they show up in. And this obviously is a collection of weather systems sharing one space, whether that's a virtual space or an actual physical space. That's the reality. And that's what you're working with every day as a leader or as a member of a team. We don't always name it to say, hey, we're just a collection of individuals that every day is showing up and doing our best. And our emotional state, our mental state, all of that is going to change on a day-to-day basis. So that's the first part of this climate and weather metaphor that I'm trying to create for you in this episode. The second part of this metaphor, and this is the macro climate. So above all of the weather systems, all of those individual weather systems of all of those people, we have the macro climate going on. And this is the organization itself, the prevailing weather of the company. This is the culture that you joined when you joined this particular organization. It's the values that actually get rewarded, that actually get recognized. It's the behaviors that get recognized and rewarded. It's those people that get promoted for behaving in certain ways or not. It's not just what's written on those posters on the wall. It is actually what gets reinforced and what gets rewarded on a day-to-day basis. It's whether it is okay to disagree with someone in a power position, how people at the top can handle bad news or disappointing news. It's whether people work on the weekends and get admired or whether people worry about them working all weekend. All of these things feed into the macro culture of the environment. Then, third part of this metaphor, I want you to think about this entire whole system, all of these individual weather systems, this macro climate. We are then bringing in different pressure fronts. Okay, work with me here. Maybe I missed my calling as a weather person on the news because I really like talking to these weather metaphors. Then we have these pressure fronts coming through. So whether it's deadlines, KPIs, quarter end, board meetings, a reorg that's happening, a merger and acquisition, the audits coming up, a big launch of something is coming up, a client presentation. There's all these storm fronts, these pressure fronts that can move through. Sometimes they're scheduled. So sometimes these are our best laid plans. And sometimes we can have things that are genuinely surprising or crises that show up, legislation changes, or something changes in our business environment that suddenly requires us to pivot and change focus. All of these things can show up as pressure fronts or different storm fronts that show up within our macro climate, given that we have different individual weather systems showing up every single day. So here's where it gets interesting. When we've got the macro climate, when that macro climate is fine and the pressure fronts are manageable, individual weather will usually take care of itself to a certain degree. If we don't have a pressure-filled macroclimate, the pressure fronts aren't feeling too strong. People have bad days, but they can move through them. The team absorbs it. It's fine. We move on. We get through to the next day. However, I would say in business today, very rarely is both the macro environment and the pressure fronts just easy peasy, smooth sailing. Typically now, let's face it, we're all being asked to do more with less. Resources are crunched, capacity is crunched. There is a changing business landscape, and this creates some really intense macro climates. This creates some really big pressure fronts coming through our teams. Rarely are we not facing uncertainty, ambiguity, change, any number of these things? And that's when the individual weather and all of these pieces coming together, everything can start colliding. You bring in pressure fronts, you bring in an intense macro climate, and you bring in the ups and downs of the individuals on your team. The stormy person collides with the foggy person. The sunny person can't really lift the mood. They're working hard to try to do that. Somebody gets really frustrated in a meeting and maybe blows up. Somebody else goes silent. Somebody starts talking about somebody else behind their back. Somebody's off crying in the bathroom. Somebody's calling in sick. This is when we start to get all of these different things happening. Most leaders, when they see this happening, they start to look at the work and say, are we putting too much workload on people? Are we putting too much pressure? Do we need to cut scope? Do we need better processes? Do we need to hire more people? That may need to happen. That is potentially true. However, sometimes and very often it's not the work. You can get extra capacity, you could get extra resources, and depending on how the people on your team are relating to one another and how they are actually sharing responsibility, managing the work together, nothing will change because the climate and how that climate is showing up for your team is chaotic. And if no one's tending to that weather system and no one's paying attention to it, you're going to get more resources or change a process and still have the same disruption going on your team and still have the same stress points. So the question now is, how do you tend to this weather system? What do you do when you have all of this going on? This is the very big high leverage action and behavior and system I want you to think about as a leader, and that is the microclimate. So, this is something that I talk to all of my clients about creating a microclimate on their team. And before I go any further on this and talking about how you can create a microclimate for your actual business team, I want to say that microclimates are, in fact, real. So, maybe I find this really interesting. I hope you all find this interesting. Maybe you already knew this, but this isn't just a leadership metaphor, it's a real thing in nature. So, a walled garden in a windy region can stay warmer than the land around it. A sheltered valley can support plants that would die just a mile away. A south facing slope holds heat that the north slope will never get. Cities are microclimates, forests are microclimates. Even that little patch of grass behind your fence, protected from the wind, it has its own weather that's different from the field next door or the patch of grass that's at the back of your yard. So the macroclimate, what is going on at the macro level is one thing, true in weather systems, true in real life, also true in leadership. The microclimate just a few feet over can be completely different. And that is why I love talking about the microclimate that you can create on your team. Here's what I want you to hear and take away from this. This is so true for teams. You can't always control the macro climate. You can certainly influence the organizational culture. You can certainly influence the way work gets done at a macro level in your organization, but you can't always fully control it. I will say it really depends on the leader at the very top of the organization and how that permeates the rest of the group. So the macro culture, the macro climate is going to be very impacted by the top dog at the organization and that senior team. Once we start to trickle down, once we get into middle levels and middle layers of leadership, the microclimate is where you can have tremendous control over the experience of work for your team. So even when the organization is intense, even when leadership above you might be making decisions that you wouldn't make or that feel really challenging, even when the pressure fronts keep coming at you, even when that macro climate might feel a little stormy, within the boundaries of your team, you have far more control than you realize. You can create that sheltered garden. You can create that place where the weather feels a little bit different, where people can take a breath when they log on in the morning, where the pressure fronts move through, but they don't destroy everything, right? Where individuals bring their own weather in and it doesn't blow the whole team apart. It's about cultivating that microclimate. And I really, really, really want this part to land. It is not a side project, cultivating a microclimate. It's not something nice that you do when you have time, when all the other project and work is finished. As a leader, creating the microclimate is the work of being a leader. It's creating the conditions on your team for the team to do its best work together. And you are the one that can drive that. You're not in it alone, and you won't be able to do it alone. You need everybody on your team to show up and contribute to this microclimate, but you are the one that determines whether attention is paid to the microclimate and the kind of behaviors that you reinforce on your team. This is all part of your job as the leader. It is the leadership work, kind of full stop. This is part of your job. Uh, Now, before I actually go into how to go about doing this, I do want to be honest about the limits of the microclimate. So, for the purposes of this episode, I'm talking about macro environments that are fairly reasonable. If you have a very, very toxic macro climate, so if your organization has a culture that is really grinding through its people and is really a toxic environment, there is only so far a microclimate can take you. There's only so much you can do to nurture a really respectful and really thriving environment with your own team. From a microculture perspective. So, for the purposes of this episode, I'm going to say I'm assuming that your macro climate, yes, it might be intense. Yes, there might be some behaviors that are, sometimes less desirable than others. Typical organization where we're not perfect. There will be some intensity. There will be some politics going on. There will be all kinds of things going on. But for the most part, we're not talking about a really seriously toxic environment. So, with that said, I want to move into how we can go about and what the components are for a really strong microclimate that you can create. So let's dive into the 5 components that I want you to think about when it comes to cultivating and creating a microclimate for your team. This is not something that happens to a team. It is something that the leader designs. That's why I say cultivating. It's like with a garden where you need to plant things, you need to weed things, prune things, you need to pay attention to it. So this is something that you cultivate over time. From a weather perspective, when we're talking weather environments, right? You're checking the weather, you're seeing what's going on, you're going to prepare for that weather. So every leader is designing this consciously. Or you're designing it by default. So if you are not consciously thinking about how do I want to set this team up for success? How do I want to create this microclimate for my team? It's going to happen by accident. It's going to happen by default. There is no third option. You're either doing it deliberately or it's happening by default. that a microclimate will form, because this is all about what is okay and what's not okay on the team, how we interact with each other, and how the work gets done. So it can either be done explicitly, and once you are explicit about this, the team can be brought in. They can buy into this. They can support you in bringing this microclimate to life, and they can help shape it with you. But as the leader, you need to extend the invitation to do this work and make this a priority for the team. So here are the 5 components that I want you to start thinking about. Component number 1, how we actually work together. So this is not about the work itself, not what is getting done, but how is it getting done? How do we collaborate on this team? How do we share information? How do decisions get made? Is it top down? Is it consensus? Is it something in between? How do we run meetings? How do we communicate when something is urgent versus when it can wait? Do we leverage Slack, email, a meeting? What are some of the ways? How do we go about getting our work done? And are we all in agreement about this? Do we all understand this? This will take a lot of confusion and chaos out of the system when you talk about the how. What can often happen is that these things are never named explicitly. And so people just default to their own preference. If they don't really love, visiting someone else, or chatting with someone else, they might accidentally hoard information or keep information close to their chest that would be best shared. So thinking about, like, let's make it explicit how we want to go about working with one another. Otherwise, the default can get set by whoever is the loudest, whoever's the most senior, who the first members of the team. They end up setting the stage, and when new members come in, they just have to kind of learn the team norms by trial and error because they're not named explicitly. So the cost of this, can often be some like micro embarrassments at the very least, where someone, violates something that was a team norm or a team custom that maybe hasn't been made explicit. But at the bigger level, what this can do is it can embed really inefficient ways of approaching work, really bad habits, bad interpersonal habits between people, and it just lets us run this entire thing by default. Small things will accumulate over time, and they are going to shape the weather of the team. And it will be, and you'll hear people then say, well, this is just how it happens around here. Like, no matter what I say, it's not going to change. It's not going to change anything around here. We start to hear things like that. So we want to really get explicit. I want you to take the defaults out of the climate and make the implicit explicit. Have the actual conversation with your team. How do we want to work together, and how do we want to manage these different elements? How do we want to make decisions? How do we communicate? This is some of the fundamental work and foundational work I do with teams when I do some longer programs with them. We really dive in to say, what do we want to make explicit here? Okay, component number 2 is I really want you talking about specifically, how are we going to share responsibility and accountability? Who owns what? When something falls through the cracks, what does it look like to own a mistake on this team? Is it safe to say, like, I messed this up? Or is everyone scrambling to deflect and point fingers? What does it look like to hold somebody accountable without it becoming personal or feeling like a really big attack? There's different ways to hold people to account. There's a whole spectrum of sharing responsibility and sharing accountability, but this is something to talk about with your teams. What are we going to do when things don't go as planned? Or how are you going to renegotiate things when you can't actually do what you say you're going to do? How are we going to talk about that? What is that going to look like? This can avoid things suddenly becoming a blame culture or hiding things from other people. We really want people to take ownership and accountability and own their roles and say, like, here's what we're going to do when it doesn't go as planned, or what are you going to do when you don't think you can meet a commitment that you need to. If we don't do these, we're not going to end up with a healthy climate. We'll either swing one way where nothing gets owned because nobody's clear on how ownership is going to run. People get frustrated. People will make assumptions that this person is accountable for it or this person is working on it. And then you get people missing critical parts of a particular process or a particular work stream. And then they're just pointing fingers at each other. Well, I thought you were going to do it. Well, I thought you were going to do it. This isn't just about naming roles and responsibilities, though that is really important. This is actually talking about, how are we going to have conversations around ownership and shared ownership? We don't want there to be these really rigid lines in the sand of, like, you cannot touch this. It's like, how do we come together and have these conversations, and how can we make this a fluid process, but also a clear process? Component number 3, is all around how you weather the highs and lows together. And so this is one that often gets missed where teams, especially high performing teams, can hit their milestones, hit their success markers, and then just keep racing on to the next thing. So, how as a team do we want to come together to celebrate and recognize success and recognize what we've done? How can we come together to do that? And also, what are we going to do when things get tough? When we get hit with that pressure front, a really tight deadline, or something we weren't expecting? How are we going to support each other and get through that together? So, really looking at what's the rhythm for celebrating what's working and what's our rhythm and how do we want to approach it when we're moving through what isn't. Uh, a lot of this when we're moving through pressure fronts that we can't expect. So, this can be around weathering through adversity or weathering through stress. This is where having resiliency built into the team. And I do a lot of work with teams around cultivating resiliency, everyday resiliency, for how we show up and move through uncertainty and difficult times. And also celebrating with one another. And this is more than just giving someone a gift card. I actually find that that personal touch where you can say, "Hey, I really appreciated how you prepared for that meeting the other day." That personal touch, really speaking to it in the moment, really timely, that can be great. And as a team, really taking a pause when you hit a big milestone or accomplish something. Or even just to say, "Hey, you know what? It's been a really busy week. Let's take half an hour and share and get together and talk about what we're really proud of this week." Just taking those moments of celebration together can make a huge difference. And that can really build momentum, build engagement, and have people feel that sense of camaraderie. I find this especially important in hybrid work where it can be really easy. The only reason you get on a call is to talk about deadlines or to join a meeting or to talk about a status, but it's like, let's just get together to celebrate and shoot the breeze for a minute, and share what's really working well. This can be such a good energy boost and energy lift for an entire team. Um, Similarly, when there's something that feels off, so if there are lows on the team, if you're like, you know what, there's a tension going on here, or there's a frustration on the team, it may not even be in the broader business environment, it may be a tension that's within the team. How skilled or equipped are your team members to be able to talk about those tensions and to speak with one another about what's not working well? Right? Because that friction can build up over time. If it doesn't get named and it doesn't get dealt with, tensions can build and build and build. They can turn into resentments, and that can quickly start shaping the climate because relationships can get fractured very easily when that tension builds up and is never named and never talked about. But it's hard to just step into those conversations if you don't feel skilled or you don't feel equipped. So as a leader really saying, have we talked about how we're going to handle this? Have my do my people have the skills to be able to have these conversations with one another? So a healthy microclimate is going to balance both of those things, celebrating those wins and giving the team rhythm and ways of celebrating. And it's also going to be able to say, like, here's some skill building and here's some ways we can navigate the lows together, whether it's interpersonal lows with one another or whether it's something that changes in that business environment. It's all about a willingness to name what's going on, both positively and what feels hard. Okay. So, how the team weathers its highs and lows, that is the climate because we are going to naturally have those highs and lows. So, this one, very, very important. Component number four, and I hinted about this a little bit earlier, conditions for psychological safety. And so, this is a term that has been used a lot and it often gets misunderstood. Psychological safety here, I want to talk about perhaps in a different way than you've heard about it, maybe in other ways. I think many of us now understand psychological safety. Is it safe to make mistakes? Is it safe to speak up? And this really fuels innovation and creativity. You can't have innovation. You can't be moving things forward if people are unable to, they can't name what isn't working, if it's not safe to speak up and speak honestly. So that's one piece. We want to be able to create spaces for continuous improvement, for feedback, for sharing information. This goes back to like talking about what's not working well. We've got to have some psychological safety in the team to being able to do that. So it's often spoken about psychological safety in the context of the leader. Are you the leader creating an environment where it's safe for people to come and share with you, safe for them to come and talk to you? What I want to add here is it's not just psychological safety about team members interacting with you as the leader. What is the psychological safety among your team members? Did they feel safe to talk to one another? This comes back to, like, do they have the skills? Do they know how to talk through tension, how to talk through conflict, how to talk through mistakes with one another, how to talk through things where they may not agree? Do they feel safe to have those kinds of conversations? Most leaders will spend their energy, especially high performing leaders, thinking about how can I, as the leader, make sure my team feels safe with me. But I want you to invest as much thought and time into thinking about how can I ensure that my team feels safe with one another? How can we have those conversations and talk about that so that they can resolve things amongst themselves? I, as the leader, don't always have to be the broker, but also what a great environment where people feel safe. When you think about a weather pattern, imagine how calming it is when you don't feel a built up pressure front with your neighbor, your colleague at work, right? You're going to be able to say, oh, I know I can go and speak to so and so. We know how to do this. We've done this before. We can talk these things through. So this becomes really, really important. For a microclimate, it can't just be the safety of the leader. It needs to be the safety across the entire team for people to share with one another. Safety with you, safety with each other. These are two different things. Both of them are required for you to have a really healthy microculture with your team. And finally, component number 5, I have saved my personal favorite for last and for component 5. So this is where creating a microculture and a culture of self-awareness, self-management, and self-regulation. So these first 4 components are about the agreements between people, could be about skill building and learning tools for creating psychological safety, or tools for and rhythms for sharing wins. This one is about people taking ownership for their own behavior and ownership about their own impact. So, as a leader, this is where you can make a huge difference. You have to walk the talk and model the talk. If your team sees you doing your own personal development work and your own professional development work, if they see you investing in yourself and you showing up and saying, you know what? I'm challenging myself to grow and develop in this position. Or, hey, this is a really stressful time right now, but I'm here for all of you. How you present yourself as a leader, your level of self awareness, your ability to manage your own emotions, to regulate your own emotions, and show up in a really regulated way models it for the whole team. And then you can start to say to your team, hey, I want you to own your impact, own your behavior, to work on your own self management and self regulation. Because even if you have perfect team agreements, perfect meeting norms, clear accountability structures, great celebration rhythms, this will all fall apart if people on the team don't have the self awareness to understand their own impact. If they don't have the self awareness to recognize their own behavior and say, oh, you know what? I didn't handle that the best way I could have. I'm going to go and do some repair work. I'm going to go and say, I'm sorry. I'm going to go and renegotiate this, or I'm going to go and speak through my impact with somebody, with a colleague on my team. I'm going to go have that conversation, but I can own it. If we are full of defensiveness, if we have lots of blind spots where we don't understand our own limitations or our own triggers, that's going to impact the entire climate of the team. So ideally, you as the leader want to cultivate deeper self-awareness for yourself so that you can model, hey, it's safe to grow. We're all going to have things that we need to develop and grow. This is a continuous improvement journey as a leader, and in your career you can always grow, you can always learn. You're never going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes, behavioral mistakes and interpersonal mistakes, and the way you show up for those and model the awareness and the impact and the repair is game changing to your microclimate. And if you do that yourself as the leader, you can ask that of the members of your team. And you can start to cultivate that with the members of your team. This is why I do so much self awareness work, self management work, and self leadership work with the executives and leaders that I work with, because until they've got that down at the top, it's really hard to foster that within the teams. You will have people on your team, you'll have individual contributors that naturally, in their own, of their own volition, on their own time, they might really love doing personal and professional development. They might have already done, different therapy, different modalities to really learn about themselves. So you will get people who do this of their own accord. Then you'll have others who would never sign up for the personal development piece, would never be thinking through or reflecting on their impact with others. And that can be part of your microculture to introduce them to this. And there's ways of doing that in a really safe and healthy and appropriate way for the workplace. But it starts with you as the leader. You need to be ready to do that work yourself. So your job as leader is to model this and model it really, really visibly. Now, as we start to come to the close here, I want to make one other thing pretty clear. It can sound like, and I know that all of my leaders listening to this, you've got a lot on your plate, and it can feel like there's a lot of pressure to perform and there's a big workload, there's big work volume. I don't want you to think that you own the microclimate 100% yourself, that it's all on you. At the beginning, remember I said it's your job to create the invitation, to start to model some of this behavior. It's really your job to get conscious about this and to open the conversation with the team or bring in, like, often this is where I get brought in as a facilitator. I get brought in to run longer term programs with teams so that we can do this work. Whatever this looks like, it doesn't need to be all on you. You're simply extending the invitation. You're willing to create this microclimate. That's really the most important step, rather than you thinking, I need to come up with all of the decision-making frameworks, all of the team norms. I need to define what accountability is going to look like. No. You can bring in the ideas and input from the group. That's some of the best ways to do it. And you can always get support in doing this work. So I don't want you to think it's all on you. Also, we can fall into a trap of just thinking, okay, Stephanie, like, yeah, I get it, the microclimate, but we're all adults in the workplace. Like, everybody should know. The thing I will sometimes hear is like, this should just be common sense. Like, people should just know how to behave and how to share responsibility in the workplace. If it were that easy, there would be no friction in our workplaces. The fact is, common sense, we make that joke, right? Common sense isn't that common, but also it means something different to each person. I say the same thing with values when it says, hey, but we've got a value of respect and I'm getting disrespected around here. If I sit 10 members of a team around a table, all 10 of them will define respect slightly differently. So the same here, what we think is common sense or like they should just know how to behave. We don't know what their beliefs are about work. We don't know how they've been raised or what environment they what experience they've had in the past. We don't know what has shaped their beliefs about these things. So this is where this work has to be done explicitly and it has to bring in the team to have these conversations. We don't want to make assumptions or think, well, I would assume they know how to behave, or I would assume they know what accountability looks like. It looks different for all of us. Your version of accountability may not be someone else's. And so let's take the fogginess out of it and really make it explicit, because that's going to help to relieve anxiety on the team. It's going to clarify expectations. It's going to allow everyone to regulate because they know what's expected of them and they've contributed to that. So that's what brings me to the final point here. When it comes to ownership of the microculture, it's not that it's all on your shoulders. It's not something that I just want you to brush off and say, like, they should all know how to do this and they should all be able to just sort this out for themselves. What I want you to be thinking about here is the responsibility for the microclimate is shared. It's shared between you and your team members, but it is asymmetrically held, meaning you, as the leader, you need to be the one to reinforce it. You need to make it explicit that you expect people to join in this conversation, that you expect them to contribute to the microclimate, that this is a co-creation, that they are responsible for how they show up and how they bring their mood through with other people, and self-regulation and self-awareness. You need to make sure that it's clear that it is an expectation on the team that they all think about and contribute to a positive microculture. So you are setting the conditions, you're setting the expectations, you are helping to name the agreements, you are modeling the behavior, you are going to hold the line when this starts to slip or when you start to notice things. And that is a meaningful share of the work for sure. It's not something you can delegate. So you set the stage like that, but you cannot do the showing up for people. Each team member is responsible for their own self-awareness, their own self-regulation, their commitment to being part of the co-creation of this microculture. As the leader, you encourage that. You can foster it. You can develop it in your people. You can expect it, but you cannot do it for them. They need to show up. So slightly more on you, asymmetrically held a little bit here by you as the leader, but each member of your team owns their part of it as well. So I wish I could just hand you a playbook and say, here's how to do it. But I will say each organization is different. So when I do this work with teams, I'm looking at the industry, your specific people, the particular quote unquote weather on your team. There is no one size fits all here. There genuinely isn't. I'm not just saying that. What I do want to leave you with is some questions. So if you have a piece of paper handy, you may want to jot down these questions. Otherwise, you can come back to them afterwards. There'll be a time marker in the notes here if you want to come back to these questions later, or just let these wash over you and think about them as you're on your walk right now or as you're in the car. I want you to think about now that you've heard what a microclimate is, now that you've heard your role in creating a microclimate for your team, what do you want to create for your team? And I mean, really, not in vague language, but really specifically, what would you like it to feel like to be a member of your team on a good day? What is the weather system? What is the microclimate that you would like to create for your team? Where does your imagination go when you think about that? And what kind of leader do you actually want to be? How do you want to define yourself as a leader? Not how necessarily others define you, not how the organizational chart describes you, not how your manager describes you in the performance reviews, but you, how would you describe the leader you are aiming to be? When you think of yourself as the cultivator of this microclimate and the one who's supporting the team and managing this microclimate, what kind of leader do you want to be? There's many different ways of approaching this, but I want you to think about this. And then when we went through those 5 components of the microclimate, which one is strongest for your team right now? Which component is it psychological safety? Is it self awareness? Is it like, do you have a really good rhythm going with how you celebrate wins? Which of those 5 components is strongest for you right now? And which is the weakest? Which one do you really think there's room to work on? And finally, what conditions do you really want to actively design for? When you think about everything there, what is happening by default on your team and what do you consciously really want to design for? Is it ways of working, agreements around that? Is it having a conversation around resiliency, accountability, adaptability? Really think about the people on your team and the dynamics that are going on right now. What is it that you feel you really want to actively design for? Now, if you are an individual contributor, if you're not a leader and you're listening to this podcast, I want you to think here are the questions I have for you. How do you want to be known by your teammates? How would you want a teammate to describe you? How do you want to show up as a collaborative member of this team? How will you show up? So, how do you want to show up and how will you show up? Those can be 2 very, very different things. How can you really own the fact that your behavior impacts your team? What is the weather that you are bringing into your team's microclimate? How are you contributing to the weather on your team? How aware are you of how your weather system is landing with others? How is your weather system interacting with others? Because whether you are a leader or an individual contributor, you as one person on this team are having an impact on everyone around you. And if we want more conscious workplaces, if we want to be able to do like much more consciously productive work, if we want to be able to thrive in our workplaces and not just make it through the day, we have to be thinking about our individual impact as a leader, as an individual contributor on the people around us. It's not just about the task of getting the work done, how this work gets done, how we show up with other people in our day to day. This is what makes all the difference in our workplaces. And I cannot underline that enough. The climate is what is shaping people's experience of work every day. So whether you are contributing to the microclimate or just letting your own weather wash over everyone else, that is what you need to be thinking about. So, with that, I want to wish you the best in terms of thinking about this microclimate, what might work for your team. You can always reach out to me. Head on over to the agencytochange.com page, check out the website. You can always reach out to talk to me about anything that is going on with your team or for yourself. Whether you just want to chat that through with me, I always love to have those kind of discovery calls and we chat it through, or whether you're looking really to put in place a program or talk about what we can do together to work with your team. I am always on the other end of an email or the other end of a phone call. You can book over at agencytochange.com. If you're not ready to jump into talking about what you might want to do with your team at this point, check out the Conscious Productivity Quiz. It is a free quiz. It is in the show notes. There are two versions of the quiz, the leadership version and the individual version. For the purpose of Microclimate, I would suggest taking the leadership version of the quiz because this is going to let you know how your approach to clarity, climate, and flow, those three components of conscious productivity, it's going to show you how your unique approach to those three elements is going to impact the team's experience of you as a leader. So if this episode has really resonated with you, that's the version of the quiz I would recommend that you take, and reach out to me anytime if you have questions from this episode. I might do a full Q&A episode at some point. So if you have questions, send them on through to me. I do read every comment. I read every email that comes in. It is me on the other side of this. And I love this community, and I love all of the questions that I get from all of you. So do reach out. And with that, I am going to sign off. Here's to more conscious workplaces, and here is to conscious productivity and letting our work be a source of well being and positively contributing to our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health rather than taking away from it. Take care, everyone, and I will catch you in the next episode.